Welcome, Bryant, creator of
Yeah.
Culture podcast. It's great to have you here. We
Yeah.
have
Thanks for having me.
it's my pleasure. We have a lot, actually, three really great topics to discuss tonight. We'll see if we can get to all of them. But before we get in and dive in, feet first, can you tell me a little bit about you? Why are you passionate about this? What does culture mean to you? And anything else you want to discuss today?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So obviously we've been talking about this type of stuff ever since I met you, 4 years back now. But, it's something as I've stepped through my career, spending a lot of time in kind of the transformation, large scale change space. I've realized, a lot of the root causes are not due to technology limitations, or not due to, process. It's mostly around the people, right? And at the end of the day, when you think about, the people of an organization, everyone always says that they're the, number one asset of an organization. But when you actually look at how an organization, um, provides a space for those people to excel and to work at their best, that kind of gets into that culture realm, which in essence is the soul of an organization, right? It's one thing that you can't see it, but it's there, and when it's working for you, and when it's not working for you. And a lot of organizations struggle with this culture where they don't want to change the culture because it's what makes them unique, or that's their kind of bread and butter in terms of being able to drive innovation. What they don't realize is you have to continuously reevaluate that and see what aspects of the culture do you want to retain, and what aspects do you need to start to shed for whatever reason. And so as I've stepped through my career, I've seen time and time again how organizations kind of have blinders on, and they don't really recognize that their culture is actually limiting the innovation. They're not providing a safe space for their employees, that psychological safety, that's allowing their employees to really, work and grow at a much higher, potential than they would in an organization. So I'm really passionate about helping organizations to understand why. I mean, this is something from, diversity of perspective, understanding all the different perspectives, why, competencies are no longer in silos, but you actually need to be able to cut across competencies and be cross-functional in your understanding of the organization, how it runs, what you do. And so I'm really excited to talk about these topics, because this is something that we've obviously talked about quite a bit, and I really enjoy talking about it. So
Yeah, for sure. There's the material out there is great. I think it needs to be unpacked a little bit further. There is still a stigma around culture, and there's often sayings that I sense it, I can feel it, but sometimes it's hard to label and define. So through this project, Creator of Culture, and discussions with people with experience, with stories to tell, we're looking to demystify that and basically label that feeling and label, I really feel that in organization. So anyway, let's jump right into it, Bryant. You mentioned something real previous about psychological safety in organizations. I wonder if you can unpack that a little bit for me and for people out listening.
yeah, I mean, I think to kind of pull on, right, a thread in terms of be able to feel it. I think it's the old school mentality, kind of chain of command, top down directive, of an organization where people really were just there to punch a time clock, or to do a task, or to do a job, and weren't really empowered. That's kind of, I think, time and time again, whether it's through studies or through actual results, is proven not to be the most effective way to build an innovative organization. And so one of the key aspects of, I think, a modern organization is this concept of psychological safety. And there's a lot of literature, obviously, about this. One of my kind of favorite people to look at. Adam Grant talks a lot about this, has written some books around it. But when you think about psychological safety, it's really, from the top of the organization, and it's really important from a leadership perspective, providing people a safe space where they can make mistakes, and not feel like they're going to be, reprimanded or penalized for making a mistake, that they're transparent, and they don't feel like they need to sweep something under the rug. And so it really gets back to the kind of humility, being able to express, your feelings in a way, for all the way, again, from the CEO, like letting their people know, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. I make mistakes every day, right? And I want to empower you to express yourself in whatever way. It's a safe space. So if you have a problem or you made a mistake, that's okay. Let's support you and help you grow, because that's what really drives that idea of a learning culture. This concept that, what helps you do your job today and what's got you to where you are in your career is not what's going to get you, to the next step, right? And every organization is very good at doing what they do today, but it's that learning culture that's going to help them to innovate and do what they need to do 5, 10, 15 years from now to be relevant. And so this psychological safety, I think, is one of those kind of cornerstones of ensuring that you build that learning culture so you can stay relevant and continue to innovate in your organization and retain talent, right? People want to be empowered. They want to feel safe in their jobs. And that kind of ties into the diversity and inclusion space, which is, another important topic. But it's something I think that a lot of the leaders today that kind of grew up in the old school mentality, really struggle with, right? They have a lot of blind spots around some of those softer, what typically are referred to as softer skills, emotional intelligence type of things. So I think it's a challenge for them, to kind of bridge that gap into the next generation and start to really build psychological safety into the culture of the organization if it's not already there.
No, that's a really interesting point, Bryant, about psychological safety. But, and a lot of things seem to basically combine to produce this safety. One is, you mentioned vulnerability, and vulnerability from the CEO down to say, hey, it is a safe organization. I make mistakes like everybody. It's okay if you do, because our culture, what we're trying to create is something, say, innovation is a priority. And to create that, it's trust, making mistakes, that safe place to learn, to grow, to move beyond your comfort zone and support that and basically say it's okay.
Yeah.
How does that relate to, in your opinion, to problem solving? Is this interrelated? Is it overlap in a way, or is that something separate, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's very much related, right? This is where, traditionally we grew up in an education system where you focus on different subjects, and you really don't learn how to express yourself or how to understand, well, why am I feeling this way, or why can't I do this, right? Or how do I overcome adversity, or if I fail, how do I get back up and kind of keep moving forward? So you're educated in mathematics, you're educated in English, you're educated in all these subjects, but at the end of the day, you get into the workforce and you realize a lot of that doesn't apply, right? A lot of it is kind of just basic problem solving skills, being able to connect the dots between the problem you're encountering today and how are you going to actually solve that problem. And so when you think about, creating that safe space, being vulnerable, being your authentic self, which drives creativity and innovation, you need to be able to have support and feel empowered to be able to problem solve. Otherwise, you're going to continue kind of the status quo, which means, if I see a problem and it's not in my, little world, it's not part of my job responsibilities, I'm just going to look the other way, and that problem is going to kind of stay there. Where if you're empowered and really owning it and feel safe and part of the team, in terms of we're all in this together, the mission, if I help you, you're going to help me type of thing. You can leverage your problem solving skills to step outside of your comfort zone or step outside of your competency area and help to kind of drive that whatever that problem is or challenge to completion. And I think that's how people grow, right? I think no longer are you going to be stuck in kind of your competency, right? Whether you're a contract professional or whether you're a finance professional or an engineer, it's very rare that you can now operate just within that mode. You need to have these kind of, again, softer skills to be able to attack these problems that we've never faced before, right? The environment's changing, at a pretty rapid pace in terms of competition, in terms of the industries, in terms of the challenges. And so problem solving is going to be critical to that, but you need to have a safe space to be able to grow and operate within that.
Brian, why can't people let their guard down, and be vulnerable? Is there something, it makes me think that, is there something from your perspective physiologically going on in our body that just is a block from doing that? Is letting down your guard? What's the holdup, I guess? Is there fear of doing that? Are people worried about exposing too much? And in your opinion, how do you get over that hump?
Yeah, I mean, so this is it's a really good question. I mean, I think it's not too much of a kind of a stretch to kind of pull the thread and realize that this is actually impacts your personal life too, in terms of the vulnerability, psychological safety, and being able to express yourself. And so just to tie it back to how we're brought up as children through the education system and through kind of college, you're rarely taught how to channel that and to understand how you're feeling, how should I express myself, and I can't speak to whether or not it's a physiological thing, but I do think in terms of overcoming, it takes a lot of self-awareness and being able to kind of look inside introspectively and say, why am I feeling this way? Or why, every time I step into this room, I freeze up and I don't want to talk about something, and really unpacking that. And is it because I don't feel comfortable with the team? Is it because I'm out of my comfort zone in terms of, whatever the subject matter is, and I don't feel like I add anything to the team? And once you start to kind of understand what those limitations or why you're feeling a certain way, you can start to develop tools or mechanisms for you to kind of channel it and be able to work through that. And so I've spent a lot of time understanding what those limitations are for me personally, and figuring out how can I overcome them, or how can I work around them to make sure it's not limiting me in terms of my growth potential. And I think it's different for everyone. Everyone's got their own kind of reasons, but it is a lot of self-reflection to really understand, what is it going to take for me to feel psychologically safe in this environment? What is it going to take for me to be vulnerable? It's different for everyone. So I think the ability to express that to you, whether it's your manager or if you're working with a close team, what your comfort level is in terms of sharing, in terms of, having that safe space, what kind of support you need, is really important. Because if you can't express that, other individuals working around you won't, necessarily know what you need to be supported. And so it's really important to do that self-reflection and then be able to communicate and articulate it to those, especially, your leadership or the peers that you work very closely with, so they can help to provide that environment for you that can help you grow and overcome some of those limitations.
Well, that's a great piece of wisdom. I mean, what I heard was almost two parts, Bryant. One part was the process and learning how to, I guess, evaluate yourself as to why you're feeling a certain way and introspect and have that ability. Does that ability, a follow-up question, does it have to be taught? Do people know how to do that? It could be hard to do. And does that take a form of education or study, experience, or even having a coach to help pull that out? Second is, once one, feels they're capable of doing that, they're competent in that sense, is it still a matter of trust on how much is disclosed, say in a workplace or a group or a community, before they can start saying, hey, I can be my authentic self and be real about it without being judged? Because I realize that this place is supportive because they get it. And if they're not, you'll never see someone's authentic self. I just wondered if you could speak upon those 2 points for a sec.
Yeah. So to the first one, I definitely think, it takes, when you think of like self-development type things, it takes learning, right? To kind of be able to have that self-reflection, self-awareness. You need to kind of be true to yourself, right? You can't kind of make excuses for things, and you really need to take an honest, look at yourself. And you may not always like kind of some of the reasons. So you have to be able to kind of unpack that. I do think, there's a lot of kind of tools or ways to kind of teach yourself, whether it's through books or things like meditation, or even things like therapy and talking to someone else, especially someone outside of either your personal life or professional life, that really, does not have any skin in the game and is just there to listen to you express things that you maybe have never expressed openly to anyone before, and help you assess that. And then on top of that, there's definitely, significant value in finding a mentor. Again, I strongly, recommend mentors outside of your kind of core professional life that can really help, unpack some of that and talk to you about some of their experiences, in dealing with that as well. In terms of, the second part, right, that's where the psychological safety in making sure that, whether it's your community or your job, whoever is in leadership positions, at the highest possible level, they are visibly, vulnerable and creating that safe space. So you have some comfort that, well, if they can do it, so can I. But it also comes to accountability from the leadership and making sure leaders at all levels of the organization, whether they're informal leaders or not, are held accountable for making sure they're creating that safe space. Because the last thing you want is someone to kind of, go through that self-reflection and start to be able to express themselves and bring their authentic selves to only be shut down, like you were saying, whether it's, someone else kind of, pushing them to the side or judging them, because that's only going to be, that much harder for them to kind of, come back out of that. And so that's, I think, one of the challenges organizations have today is we speak a lot about diversity and inclusion, psychological safety, but there's not a lot of action in terms of, the leaders of the organization openly, expressing themselves and being vulnerable, but also holding everyone else accountable in the organization to make sure that they're creating that safe space as well. And I think that goes for, any community organization, or even in your professional lives, whether it's a relationship or family.
That's so interesting. And it brings me to the next point that we've talked about in the past, and beneficial, I think, for our discussion here today. And that's of, you say, accountability and the concept of ownership. I'm just thinking about what you just said. If someone went through all those steps to self-reflect, to learn why, to be able to turn around and express themselves only to be shut down, that's not a good recipe. I mean, imagine, put yourself in that person's shoes who has had the courage to go down that road only to be let down, lost them forever.
Yep.
So can you talk about, accountability? I know, from the ownership perspective, that not only are we talking the talk, but walking the walk and backing up what we're saying.
Yeah.
Unpack that, explain that a little bit. And if you have an example, it doesn't have to get, names and things like that, but just a
Yep.
general example, Bryant, maybe of, something you've seen that worked, or someone who it backfired because there wasn't ownership.
Yeah, no, I mean, ownership and accountability go hand in hand, right? And no matter, I think, what you're talking about, and especially when you get into this area, of psychological safety, diversity, inclusion, it's an imperative that, whatever the person's role, let's focus in on kind of a leader of an organization, that they actually own it, and they're holding themselves accountable, right? And they're asking other people in the organization to hold themselves accountable, because the last thing you want is, you go out and hire a diversity and inclusion, expert. You bring them into the organization and they start talking about these concepts, and people start saying, okay, yeah, this is great. I love this. This is what we need. And then the CEO of the organization, is exhibiting the exact opposite of kind of what they're talking about in terms of actions, right? They're talking it. They're kind of openly expressing support by saying, listen to this person that's talking about this, but in their actions, they're not following through, with that, and they're not holding themselves accountable for creating the safe space. So, I can speak to kind of a couple examples where I've seen senior leaders, openly ridicule people in meetings and kind of scream at them and berate them, right? And that's where, again, not only are they not holding themselves accountable, but they're not actually, walking the walk. They may be, again, supporting the words, saying the words, but when people see a senior leader in the organization, yelling at a person or berating a person or belittling them, they're immediately going to shut down and say, okay, I don't want to ever say anything in front of this person, because what if I'm the next one on the list? And so that's where the accountability, and we're human, right? So at the end of the day, we can't always hold ourselves accountable, especially when we put ourselves in certain situations. But being able to say, hey, Mike, I want to make sure, I'm creating a safe space, right? Can you hold me accountable? And if you see something in the meeting, please, immediately, just call me out and say, hey, Brian, I don't think that's appropriate. And I'm giving you, that I'm empowering you, whatever your level in the organization is, to hold me accountable, right? And I think that's really important for senior leaders, CEOs, any level of management, to allow their staff, to allow their peers to hold them accountable openly and publicly, because that's where everyone starts to understand, okay, this is not just on me to hold myself accountable. This is really all of us working together to hold each other accountable. And that lends itself to, again, that creating that safe space where we all are in it together, working towards the same vision.
It's all interconnected. So, Bryant, from your perspective, based on that example that you gave, does a group, a community, an organization, whatever it is, a group of people, have a chance if the top is not walking the walk, but say a lot of people in the middle, or basically in the field, are walking the walk? Does the organization, group, or community have a chance to be as transformational or impact culture in a positive way in that sense?
So, do they have a chance to be as transformational or impact culture? Yes, but I would caveat with that is it's much more difficult, right? And the key to even being able to accomplish any transformation in that scenario is coordination, right? Because what you can't have, and this happens quite often in organizations, is you have all these pockets of kind of change champions, that are driving change, driving positive culture change, and are really trying to bring some of these issues to the forefront and help people understand, some of these concepts and why psychological safety is so important. And they're exhibiting themselves, but if they're all working in silos in these pockets, ultimately you're going to see very little, impact. if they coordinate across the organization to the point where, people are starting to see, okay, look at all of them, they're exhibiting this, look how, effective they are working together, they all kind of have a common understanding, they have a lot of support. Not only may that get some of the CEO, or senior leaders interest, but it's also going to get more people to buy into that concept. So I think, a lot of us find ourselves in situations where we don't have that organizational support from the top, or that kind of psychological safety net, and we're having to kind of drive it. The key is to drive it together, right? And help that transformation move forward in a way that you will not be able to if you're trying to throw it on your back and kind of push it across the finish line, because it won't stick. You may see some traction, but inevitably, you're going to take a couple steps forward and 10 steps back.
Yeah. Maybe short-term gains, it seems, but maybe not sustainable for the future.
Yep.
Just to kind of close this out, Bryant, from your perspective, how important is culture today in having, something that we just discussed, all those 3 particular points that roll up into culture, as we say? How important is it today for individuals, teams, organizations, and communities, and why so?
Yeah, I mean, I think culture is critical, right? More than ever. I think as we move into this world, this kind of global world, as we move more towards remote, connectivity, whether it's with friends or, with family or within a company, culture is going to be what kind of pulls everyone together and helps establish, right, what the kind of values of the organization, what the norms of the organization, and how we all work together, right? And as we said, right, it's not something you can necessarily see, but when you step into an organization, you very quickly can kind of feel that culture and whether it's a good fit or not. And I think it's really important that we recognize, a lot of the diversity, inclusion, diversity from perspective, especially, right? That culture driven by the same type of person, whether it's race or whether it's upbringing or experience or competency. What you don't want is a culture driven entirely by engineers. You don't want a culture driven entirely by accountants. You don't want a culture driven entirely by MBAs. You want a diverse culture, right? Because that's ultimately what's going to have a diverse perspective and help you to kind of drive that positive change. And where you may have a blind spot, I can see very clearly, and where I have a blind spot, you can see very clearly, and you can quickly identify what's working in the culture, what's not working in the culture, and help to rectify that. I think a lot of people traditionally have kind of just accepted the culture and said this is what it is. I think going forward, we need to recognize it's a fluid thing, right? There's kind of the nucleus may stay the same, but it's evolving over time as we adapt and how we work together in our personal lives, in our professional lives. I think the culture needs to move with that. And if we can find that symbiotic relationship, I think those companies are going to experience significant potential and growth opportunities within their people.
Well, that's great insight, Bryant. It really is. And I think based on that insight, I'm looking at part 2 of this. I don't know. Right. Do you think that?
I will.
You love just hit upon a couple extra topics there that all roll up. We have to.
Yeah, I'm in. Just tell me when, man.
So I think the next one, you mentioned diversity, how, a group, a community, an organization built up of these multiple perspectives. You can't have all the same. There's no growth, and it's not sustainable.
Yep.
That needs to be our discussion for next time. So with that being said, I want to thank Bryant Vitanza, transformational connoisseur, and really appreciate the insight. It's nuggets of wisdom it's so impactful in today. So thank you, Bryant. It was great having you today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.